at the Small Grants Program side event at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. This is wonderful to see everybody. We wanted to make this side event informal as possible to see everybody's faces and have more easy interaction. So I hope you enjoy this format where we can see each other, and you can also put your comments in your chat boxes. I would like to first inform that there is a Spanish translation available. So if you prefer to listen in Spanish, please select the Spanish button in the bottom. You can choose the language selection. Maybe I can ask Noel how to do that, just in case people have issues on that.
Sure, yes, thank you, Yoko. So everybody should see in your screen, just next to the reaction button, you would see like a little word that says interpretation. And there you can choose Spanish or English. So if you choose Spanish, every time someone speaks in English, you will see the translation. You will hear the translation, and if you choose English, every time someone speaks Spanish, you will hear the translator speaking in English. If you have any problems, just you can send me a private text.
Please chat on the box if you have any issues. And at the same time, please also mute yourself unless you're speaking. And thank you very much for that cooperation so that we can listen in clearly. So again, let me start officially again this side event. Welcome to this side event. My name is Yoko Watanabe. I'm the Global Manager of the GF Small Grants Program implemented at United Nations Development Program. This side event will highlight how Indigenous people has been the steward of global environment and how international organizations such as the GF Small Grants Program, UNDP and GF and others have engaged and partnered with them over the past 2.5 decades. So as part one of this side event, we will be introducing a retrospective report on SGP's 20 years of engagement with Indigenous people. This is a publication that we have launched at the latest last GF Council in December 2020, where we met with a GF CSO consultation meeting. And we will be hearing reflection based on that from our Indigenous leader, Lucy Mulenke, and also from Sarawat from the GEF Secretariat. Following that, we will have a part two of this side event where we will be featuring a panel of distinguished Indigenous leaders and colleagues from international organizations to discuss how SGP projects, the Small Grants Projects Initiative, have engaged and empowered Indigenous peoples. One on Indigenous peoples and energy issue from Joan Carling, as well as Indigenous Peoples Fellowship Program we have for capacity development of Indigenous peoples leadership from Barsha Lecky. And then we will be talking about the Mercury Initiative, the artisanal gold mining issue from Francis Oti Boateng. And then finally, we will have also discussion on the biodiversity issues and also more the landscape and territorial management issues on ICCA by Fabiola Kiivi. And so I really look forward to this distinguished panel and lively interaction based on that. And please start, putting your comments, questions in the chat box as we listen to this. And finally, the panel will also review how SGP can better support Indigenous people during this current phase of our operation, as well as upcoming GEF 8 discussion where the replenishment negotiation have started last week. And in this context, we are delighted to have a special guest speaker, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO of GF, today to provide his vision and ambition towards GF8 and the enhanced role and support towards Indigenous people in this context. As we know, Carlos Manuel has been a great friend and supporter of Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to hearing his words on that regard. So hope we really look forward to the next hour and a half, a great interaction and great information sharing and knowledges. And I'm really grateful to see over 130 participants now joined here today around the world, including the SGP national coordinators and all our partners and some of the names that we know very familiar with, but also new friends coming in here. So thank you very much. So let me start and jump into the part one of this discussion. The introduction of this new SGP publication, which was led by Terence A. Hayedi, who is our Indigenous people focal point at the Small Grants and UNDP. And he have led this fascinating publication, which really consolidates the lessons and the experiences of the past 25 years of SGP. The indigenous peoples have long been recognized as a steward of environment, conserving biodiversity, and adapting to the climate change and using traditional knowledges. So as one of the pioneer work, SGP has been recognized as a primary modalities of engagement with indigenous people, and not only at the GEF, but also with other partners such as Germany and also Adaptation Fund, and also with Japanese fund on the Satoyama initiative and many others. The publication celebrates past achievement and advances critical lessons over the past 25 years and forging new partnership on indigenous peoples. And also we're looking into new opportunities and what can we do more in the GF8 and beyond. And SGP has invested around over $163 million, close to 6,000 projects that have benefited indigenous people. And this actually represents about 37% of the entire SGP portfolio in the participating countries where indigenous peoples are present. And this was actually really happy discovery as we really dug into our portfolio, as we have reached over 37% and more to be coming. SGP has also used a lot of different grant making modality and governance structure to enable indigenous people's participation, such as flexible formats, including video templates and many others. I'm sure we'll be hearing about these different approaches and governance that enabled more indigenous people's participation. And we could, of course, do more, and happy to hear from many of you about this. And we have developed a lot of different partnerships to strengthen territorial governance structure, particularly through ICCA, and also RED Plus initiative on the sustainable forest management, and also community-based adaptation initiatives. And we really look forward to enhancing and expanding these initiatives. And finally, the SGP plans to expand the scale and scope of initiatives moving forward with IPLCs. And we really see that there is many ways to do that, including blended financing, as well as also working under the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The Paris Agreement all recognize the important role of indigenous people. And now is a time to really act on these guidances and not put just in paper, but real action on the ground. And that's what we do from the Small Grants Program, and trying to do this further. Finally, the publication is really dedicated to all of you and the thousands of indigenous people who are here and around the world. And I think the UN Permanent Forum is the really a great opportunity to introduce this and share the lessons learned, and really use this opportunity to hear from you what we can do more as we move forward under this exciting global sort of agenda and global setting in terms of convention and others. And there is momentum to do more. And SGP is committed to doing further in engaging with indigenous people and have a greater results on the ground and amplify these through scaling up. So with this few words, as I set the scene, I'd like to now show some brief video to set the scene and highlight the work of Small Grants Program with partners, with all of you. So please have the video on. A little bit of patience, please, here. Should be coming up soon. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this brief video showing the great partnership with Indigenous peoples and engagement that we have had over the past 2.5 decades of experiences. Now we would like to move on to, based on this publication, I would like to now ask our key partners to provide some reflection and feedback on the importance of the GF and Small Grants Program engaging with Indigenous peoples. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Lucy Mulenke, my dear friend and chair of the GF's Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group. I know Lucy has been having a busy morning already with many other side events, but over to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Yoko, and thank you, Terence, also Manuel, from GF, and many others who have just seen them on the screen. Thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming IPAG to present, and also thank you, Sarah, for being there. I'm sure you'll be able to add to a little bit of more of what I'm going to say in talking about IPAG, the Indigenous People Advisory Group. I don't know if you have the PowerPoint. I'm not very good in presenting PowerPoints because I'm used to talking with the communities. But I'll just give you a bit of back history as that comes up there. Is that Small Grants Program have been really a great supporter of Indigenous people, funding small grants program, funding for Indigenous people in different parts of the world. And Indigenous people do appreciate that, because with the local communities, they have been doing applications and have been able to, get funding. And for a long time, in fact, by the time I knew about the global environment facilities, while I was a young journalist somewhere, it was simply to have been involved from the word go in the 80s and 90s with the Small Grants Program here in Nairobi. And I think it's one of the oldest fund that I know on environment that has really looked at different issues and of local communities and Indigenous people at the ground level. But at the same time, even despite the fact that there is this great work, there are also different Indigenous people in different parts of the world who are looking at it and saying that we are not getting enough funding. We want more funding for Indigenous people. We want to also move to a certain level where we can be able to have more funding for Indigenous people apart from the Small Grants Program. And that is where the discussion came in for a different discussion within the Indigenous people.
Lucy?
You're muted.
Somehow you got muted.
Lucy. Yeah.
I think they were trying to mute people because there was some background noise.
Okay, I think
we missed maybe the last 30 seconds.
Yes, and I can, yeah, You have unmuted me. I couldn't unmute myself anyway, so that's problem. Sorry about that. So this concern of Indigenous people to have a bit more than what they exactly had from the small grants program was a step ahead to upgrade the work of Indigenous people in terms of having more funding, and to show the world that we can also be able to handle bigger projects and be able to participate fully, and to have the Jeff also understand about us more further. And we were lucky at that point also. Yoko was still in the GA. She was the focal point at the Global Environment Facility, and a team was put together. There was discussion, and then there was formation of the Indigenous People Advisory Group. And our main task was also to create, to have a contribution, especially on the principal guidelines of engagement of Indigenous people in GEF, which we did quite well, and also input to the GEF Indigenous people, different issues that were going to be done, to be undertaken in different discussions, and also in fundraising, to make sure that the GEF could understand how much money more we wanted, not only the small grants program, but small grants program still remains our main ally to be able to give us to work with us. And what exactly did we do? What were we going to do? One of the thing is that we had already been selected a number of there was 7 representatives, and there was every region had a different representative there. And we had also the agencies who also joined us, so that we can come a team together and be able to have this liaison guided by the GEF. And one of the things we did was to develop a work plan, which we did. And the main thing with the work plan was to try and make sure that we have, what are the issues that we are concerned with, the capacity building, and also to have fundraising arrangements to expand the number of Indigenous people's projects. And we really succeeded in that, because we worked so hard with the guidance of Jeff, and especially to know that Jeff has got also a way of working. It works in different areas, 5 areas in the mandate, and now it's added Mercury and others, which is very important for Indigenous people. And we were able to work very hard to make sure that we have additional funding for Indigenous people, which we have already made a step ahead by having the inclusive conservation fund that maybe Sarah will talk about it, and she can be able to tell us more, to show what steps we have already moved ahead and have this particular fund for Indigenous people. And it's a milestone, but also Indigenous people have to know that we really have to be patient and work together collectively, as we have seen different work that we've been able to do. And this particular funding also has been able to help us to see our credibility there as IPAC as an advisory group, and to be able to really help in maintaining and looking at different issues. We have also worked issues on capacity building and so on, and we are going on. And I think I'll stop there, because I don't know what's happening with the presentation. Is going on and off, but I must say that the work we've done, we can always continue working together. And I want to thank Yoko and Sarah. I'm sure you are going to add into that, considering that there were quite a number of issues that we need to inform the Indigenous communities, who are really Indigenous peoples and local communities who are attending this particular forum. And it's very important for them to see our work and to say that we are continuing, and we will make sure that as part of the funding and allies that we have, we will be able to continue working together and attending the different meetings in GEF, the council meetings, making the council members understand Indigenous people, and to be able to support them in different funding is very crucial in our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that word. And so sorry for the glitches with the muting and also the slides, but we were able to hear you fully. And thank you very much for that. And I really want to thank you as a leader and also a chair of Indigenous People Advisory Group, who have really led the Indigenous people's work at the GF and beyond. And your contribution is tremendous. And I know you started as a small grants grantee as well. and to a National Steering Committee member. And you have also provided really strong inputs and advice on how we can work further with Indigenous people moving forwards. Thank you very much, Lucy. With that, I'd like to invite our good friend, Sarah Watt, as well from the GF Secretariat, who's been the Indigenous people focal point. And Sarah, over to you for a few words.
Thank you, Yoko. Thank you, Lucy. Good morning, good evening, or good time of the day. I heard someone say on a CPD meeting, and I like that formulation. So I want to thank Lucy for her excellent overview of how we've been working to engage Indigenous peoples at the GEF. I'm a biodiversity specialist at the GEF, and I work with our Indigenous peoples engagement. So we have, as Lucy mentioned, the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. So that was in our programming strategy, and it's to support Indigenous conservation. IUCN and Conservation International were selected as the agencies to take that forward. Many of you may have applied to it. We had so many applications, and thank you for all that work. And then we had a very hard job. There were various levels of people to try to come to decisions. In the final group, that was Lucy was part of it, as well as some other Indigenous leaders made the final decisions. And it was quite a challenging decision. So thank you for those applications. Thank you for your advocacy. That I would also say the advocacy makes it possible for us to put Indigenous peoples within our strategies and to try to have the resources available for them. And we also are currently developing our next round of programming strategies. In the first version that we have proposed, we included a continuation of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. So that would be more resources, additional resources going in to that initiative to fund Indigenous conservation. But as Lucy mentioned, we don't only work in conservation. And so there are many areas to be working. We've been working with the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group, in particular, say on Mercury, and within that agreement, recognizing as a new agreement that they're still learning about some of these issues and trying to increase their representation there. And then, I think one of the things that's been incredibly helpful for us recently is that we updated our safeguards policies. And one of our minimum standards for safeguards, but in some of that, it is understanding, yes, you can say FPIC is required for projects that involve Indigenous peoples, but what does that really look like in certain types of projects? What does that look like when we're trying to balance requirements to move at a certain speed and try to move quickly to get to implementation, which is a good goal, but may be difficult to reconcile with remote people who in remote places that, and Indigenous timelines for decision making. And so trying to make sure that our safeguards accomplish the goal that they live out their spirit, right? Which is to ensure the protection of Indigenous peoples and other issues. And so, but also get implemented in ways that really work. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think I'll let other folks take up. I don't want to take too much time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great word and also the great initiative on the inclusive conservation. One thing that we're really trying in Small Grants Program is really to share the lessons and the approaches that worked and also not worked from our program and really build that experiences towards larger initiative like inclusive conservation, as well as other full-size and medium-sized projects. And there's been a lot of great fruitful collaboration already ongoing on the ground, and we're talking about how we can do this integration more. And I'm delighted to see Carlos Manuel here, who would be talking later about more future vision and ambition about integration and greater vision on how we can work with Indigenous people. So with that, thank you again, Lucy and Sarah, for your reflection and introduction on the great work that is ongoing. And also we're really delighted to had a chance to introduce this publication that we were able to launch at the Jeff Council last time in December. So with that, I'll be concluding the part 1 of this side event, and then forwarding to part 2, which our biodiversity advisor and Indigenous Peoples focal point, Terrence Hay-Eddy, will be leading this exciting panel discussion, which will be talking real examples on the ground, on not only on biodiversity, but also on mercury and other issues, as we discussed by Sarah and Lucy. So over to you, Terrence.
So thank you, Yoko. Good evening to everyone, or good time of day. We have 4 panelists this evening. Each will give you a different perspective from different Jeff focal areas. We'll start with Joanne Carling in relation to one of the innovation programs, as we call them, on Indigenous peoples' access to energy. Joanne Carling is an Indigenous activist from the Philippines, former Secretary General of the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. She was also a member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and co-convener of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group for Sustainable Development. And currently she is the director of the Indigenous Peoples Rights International NGO, I guess it is. So Joanne, can you please tell us about the Indigenous Peoples Major Group initiative on access to appropriate forms of energy, and what types of partnerships have you been targeting, and how has SGP been able to be of support up until this point? The floor is yours, Joanne.
Yeah, thank you, Terrence, and thank you for the asking me to be part of this event. It's a privilege for me to share to you the partnership that we have with UNDP-SGP, particularly in support to the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples as an initiative of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group. So can I request okay, so just to provide the context of this, of why we initiated this project, is because in our work with the Sustainable Development, Goal 7 of the SDGs relates with clean and affordable energy with a clear target of energy for all. That is one. And the second also is that under climate change, the just transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy is very much needed in order for us to effectively combat climate change. However, with all the energy projects that has happened in the past, the challenges that Indigenous peoples face is that in spite of the fact that energy projects are developed in Indigenous territories, millions still lack access to energy. We see this in a lot of dam projects, because dam projects is still considered as clean energy. And so it is also leading to a lot of human rights violations. We've seen land grabbing, displacement, destruction of livelihoods, food insecurity, and even abuse for women. And so this is the reality in Indigenous territories. But at the same time, while the SDGs call for partnerships in the implementation of these goals, there is a lack of inclusion of Indigenous peoples in existing energy partnerships in the broader energy partnerships. So we are very happy that we have this partnership with UNDP-SGP, but also with IPAG as another UN agency. Next, please. Now, what are the opportunities provided under the SDGs for us? One is the pledge for leaving no one behind, and reaching those furthest behind first. Meaning that when we're talking of renewable energy, those that do not have access to energy in remote areas, which is 70%, by the way, of the total Indigenous peoples, majority of which do not have access to energy, will thereby be targeted for energy access. Likewise, the SDGs seek to realize human rights for all. So it is underpinned by human rights, meaning that the renewable energy development should also recognize respect human rights, including the rights of indigenous peoples. But likewise, having access to energy contributes directly to other goals of the SDGs, from ending hunger and ending poverty, empowerment of women, decent work, inequality, conservation of forests. So it's clearly underpinned. No, the access to renewable energy is really has multidimensional contributions. And finally, it will directly contribute, like I mentioned, to climate change solutions. But more importantly, indigenous peoples are also having initiatives, no, for renewable energy, which then there is then an avenue to upscale all these initiatives of indigenous peoples. Next. So what is the Right Energy Partnership that we are building, and that already is includes the SGP? It's an open platform for different stakeholders to come together with one is to have to ensure renewable energy that is fully aligned with the respect and protection of human rights. And second is to facilitate access to renewable energy of at least 50 million indigenous peoples by 2030 that is consistent with their development aspirations. So the aim is really also to provide, and this is where the partnership with the SGP is playing a critical role. Next. So the principles that we have is already mentioned, human rights, but also equitable benefit sharing, full inclusion and empowerment of women. So we put women really at the center, respect and promotion of self-determined sustainable development, and empowerment of indigenous communities, uphold indigenous leadership, and guided by the principles of transparency, accountability, and mutual respect. So these partnership principles guides the way we implement the Right Energy Partnership. Next. Now, these are the key activities. One is the mobilization of finances, but also support to community pilot projects in terms of replication of best practices, launch advocacy campaigns, because there are now many renewable energy driven by corporations that are still leading to land grabbing. This is happening with windmill, solar farms, for example, that are still under business as usual. So, IPMG is actually working on these issues in Kenya and Nepal, in the Philippines, in relation to this kind of renewable energy by the private sector. And finally, to build and strengthen partnerships with development actors, which also includes the private sector, which also includes investors, as long as they align themselves to the principles of this partnership and they're willing to really put indigenous communities at the center and that they will be empowered. So it's a paradigm shift from the usual business as usual approach. Next. So finally, now we come to the UNDP-SGP partnership, which is funding support to community-based renewable energy projects of indigenous peoples in least developed countries. So we have the projects in Cameroon, DRC, Honduras, Nepal, and also Cambodia. No, but because of the COVID, there were delays in terms of the project implementation. So what I can cite is the example that we have in Cameroon, and these are the solar power. The photo is in Cameroon. In fact, it's a solar power generation for communities. And the good thing here is that this project is being led by women, and they have a strong ownership of this project, And this is really what we want, that this project is driven and owned by communities. And because it's happening also now during the COVID, part of the budget was used for COVID response, particularly prevention. So the health protocols, not supporting health protocols, so to avoid the communities to be infected. So that also allows some flexibility to address the crisis that we have. Part of this is also the capacity building, not particularly training of youth for technical, that they will be able to maintain, like this one. You see the youth, they're the ones trained for the technical maintenance of the solar plates. And then it's also, the project is also going beyond just having access, but also building capacities of communities for alternative energy use, like, for example, tapping into biogas, development or production of biogas. And as I mentioned earlier, the empowerment of indigenous women. So this as a pilot is already showing a lot of very positive impact on the ground. And I believe that is the premise also of SGP, making change on the ground, empowering communities on the ground. And this is now what we see with the Right Energy Partnership, with the SGP program. And also I would like to appreciate the flexibility of the SGP program in terms of stretching the budget, allowing the budget to accommodate this kind of renewable energy projects at the community level. So I want to end with that, but also to draw your attention that you can visit our website, the Right Energy Partnership website, for more information on our work on this. But again, this is my way of expressing the appreciation of the Indigenous Peoples major group to this kind of partnership, which we hope we will continue in the years to come as we make these transformational changes on the ground in empowering Indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne. So the theme of this year's Permanent Forum is SDG 16 on partnerships. And so we very much see this innovation program as a catalyst. In UNDP, the word accelerator is being used very often to harness maybe new partnerships and attract more investments, appropriate investments, as you said. Just to say, we have, I think, maybe 5 colleagues from countries involved, SGP from Cambodia, Honduras, El Salvador, Nepal, and Timor-Leste. So maybe at the end, if there are a few moments, we could invite some of them to say a few words. And we hoped also to have the South-South cooperation. The Malaysia Micro Hydro project has been presented previously at the high-level political forum, and we were hoping that Timor-Leste, which is nearby, would be able to have a South-South exchange, and hopefully when COVID allows, that will happen. So now we will move to our next speaker, who, let's see the order. So we are moving now to Nepal, actually. So we're moving to hear from Basha Lekki, who is one of the 8 national SGP Indigenous Fellows. Basha is passionate about environmental protection as well as the rights of Indigenous peoples and women in Nepal. Basha has experience working with the Nepal Federation of Indigenous Nationalities on its climate change partnership program, where she worked, amongst other things, on conducting a forest carbon inventory in 2015. In 2016, she was nominated as a Goodwill Ambassador for the Clean Up Nepal campaign. So if Basha, you could put on your camera. And the question to you is, could you please tell us about your experience working as an Indigenous Peoples Fellow on climate change in Nepal, and what are your plans now for the future after you completed the fellowship? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Terence. Hello, everyone. My name is Barsha Leakey, and talking about my fellowship, my tenure, a one-year tenure of fellowship. So I belong to Tharu community, one of the 59 indigenous communities from Nepal. The total grant for this fellowship was $20,000, and the focal area obviously was Indigenous peoples. Next slide, please. The key objective, or basically the work plan, was to develop capacity of Indigenous IP fellow, that's me, and strengthen institutions. As I talked, there are 59 different Indigenous institutions in Nepal, and to increase their portfolio of projects led by them with SGP, and to demonstrate the modalities for grant making by involving directly of Indigenous people, that is a leading SGP project directly by IPs. Next slide. Here I organized, during my fellowship, I organized a consultation meeting with Indigenous peoples. Here are the pictures, which states that we demonstrated modality making processes with directly involvement of IPs, and we also shared the experience of the ongoing SGP project so that the IPOs, the Indigenous peoples organizations understand it better. Next slide. This is a group picture again of the orientation program for the Indigenous peoples to them to understand, to access the grant making modalities for SGP projects. And this was, I also shared about my experience of attending regional dialogue on Indigenous youth social entrepreneurship held in Bangkok. Next slide. Yeah, so I also got the opportunity to visit various field site of SGP projects to observe the initiatives taken by SGP grantees. So picture one shows the group photo of women which I took during my field visit, and the happy faces suggests that they were happy to receive a training and awareness classes about animal rearing, fodder plantation, and grazing management, which eventually increased the productivity. Picture number two shows the plantation. It's the mango tree plantation near a riverbank side. Basically agroforestry to prevent loss of land cutting, and land cutting cases during flood. And picture number three, I call it, picture number three, the next picture. Yeah, so this picture shows an empowered woman. I call her empowered woman because she's financially independent through handicraft and quilt making, which is one of the project activities that supported the livelihood of local community and Indigenous people. So the beauty of small grants projects that I closely observed is that it involves local communities and Indigenous peoples also by supporting alternative livelihood opportunities, alternative livelihood opportunities. Next slide. So this is where I supported Baidawas. They are the traditional healers of Tharu community of Nepal, and we supported them with by providing solar dryer, which is by providing them access to renewable energy technology for them to ease to dry the herbal plants they use for curing different diseases. Next slide. So this is where I participated in international conferences. This is COP25 held in Madrid, Spain. And I was fortunate enough to participate in panel discussion in our resilience lab. So these are the pictures. Next slide. And here again, a different panel discussion where I got the opportunity to speak about engagement of indigenous peoples in NDC of Nepal, talking about, I talked about GEF-SGP projects and indigenous people scenario in Nepal. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the video documentation. It's in YouTube. I've also shared the link to the YouTube. So after this session, please have a look over this video, and it also has English subtitles too. So it won't be a problem to understand. This video is regarding Vaidavas, as I talked earlier. They are the indigenous traditional healers, traditional doctors from Tarai, Nepal. Next slide. So these are the learnings during my 1-year fellowship tenure. I attended different international workshops like COP25 and regional dialogue on indigenous youth social entrepreneurs, which was entirely a different experience and exposure. And I will link how it's developed my ability shortly in the next slide. I also learned about indigenous.
Barsha, you need to unmute yourself, actually. I think it was...
Yeah, thank you. Because Nepal is a landlocked country, and I did study about these various landscapes, but attending this workshop gave me clearer idea of indigenous issues in marine and mountain areas too. It also helped me build networks and communication, which is very important in this contemporary world, I say, which helped me to work in a project that now I'm working, supported by UNESCO and the IPP. It also gave me the idea of leading and directing an indigenous social enterprise, where I learned about business skills, branding, marketing, and e-commerce skills. Next slide, please. So yeah, talking about future plans, I currently am leading a project under UNESCO, Asia Indigenous Peoples platform, and AIYP, which is a COVID response project. And also now that I am a beauty queen and I'm Miss Nepal, so I take, as an influencer, I take this opportunity to promote SGP projects, services like our grantees that have developed improved cooking stoves, 3D printing, aquaponics, smart village concept, homestays, etc., to a larger audience through my social media handles. So now I would take this opportunity to promote these eco-friendly products and renewable energy opportunities. And also, as I talked about earlier, I have been planning to come up as a indigenous entrepreneur, as I will be recycling aluminum beer cans into jewelry. So this will be from waste to ornaments. So now these are my future plans. At the end, I would like to thank GEF-SGP for providing me with Indigenous Peoples Fellowship, which surely has enhanced my abilities through various exposures. And to participate in today's side event of UNFPII, I extremely feel grateful, blessed, and honored. Thank you so much, Terence.
So thank you so much. So yeah, one of the achievements I didn't mention earlier is that Barsha was also voted the first indigenous Tharu woman to be Miss Nepal. So hopefully that will expand your influence ever further and wider, also with the fellowship. We also have our colleagues from SGP Nepal, Vivek, who may want to say something or put it in the chat as we move along. We're now going to shift to the question of mercury that Lucy was talking about as a high priority for Indigenous peoples under the Minamata Convention. We'll be hearing now from Francis Oti Boateng from Ghana, if you could put on your camera, who is an Ashanti, Akan speaking Ashanti from Ghana. He's also the District Chief Executive for Asante Akim North. and is active in the field of community mining issues in his country, working closely with key stakeholders, including traditional authorities, political parties, youth groups, and religious leaders. So Francis, Ghana was formerly known as the Gold Coast and famous for its precious metals. How did African kingdoms and indigenous communities extract these minerals before colonial times, and what has changed now? If you could tell us your experience, the floor is yours. Okay, we're just trying to unmute. Try to unmute yourself now. You should be possible, Francis. Okay, we seem to be having, maybe Francis, if you can switch off your camera and then just.
Morning. This is Francis.
Okay, go ahead. Maybe Francis, if you switch off your video and just put on audio, it might increase the bandwidth. If this doesn't work, we also have our colleague George from Ghana who might need to step in, but Francis, I see your microphone is on and your camera is off, so you should be. Francis, could you go ahead? Well, what I suggest is we will come back to Francis. If we'll go ahead now with the fourth speaker, and we'll come back to you, Francis, and see if your connection is better in a few minutes. So the fourth panelist is now, we are moving to Central America. We will be hearing from Miss Fabiola Kijivix, who is an indigenous youth from the Maya Quiche peoples in the southwest region of Quetzaltenango in Guatemala. Fabiola has been involved in implementing an SGP project whose title is The Heart of the Mountain in the valley of Palajunoch, focusing on recovering ancestral knowledge by teaching young people about medicinal plants, which have been supported through the Global Support Initiative on Indigenous Peoples and Community Conserved Territories and Areas, or ICCAs, with funding from the German government, which is delivered by the SGP. So Fabiola, what is your long-term vision for your community, and how can young people contribute to recover ancestral knowledge, wisdom, and practices? And please tell us about how the SGP has been able to support that. The floor is yours.
Hola, mucho gusto a todos. Gracias por la oportunidad de poder estar en este espacio. A todo el mundo, hola, estamos acá para brindarles nuestro conocimiento desde acá de Guatemala y también de nuestro municipio de Quetzaltenango. Hola, me presento. Mi nombre es Fabiola Kijivix. Soy una mujer del pueblo Maya Quiché. Pues uno de mis desafíos durante mi caminar, y también contarles de dónde soy de la comunidad de Xepache de Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. Durante todo mi caminar me motiva a decirles, ser joven mujer me ha hecho trabajar y cumplir con mis sueños y nunca olvidarme de quién soy. Pues vengo de una familia de 3 hermanos y 2 hermanas y también soy de una familia que se dedica al cultivo de hortalizas y trabajar en el campo. Una de mis retos acá en la comunidad, pues, por ser mujer, aquí en las comunidades se dicen que solo nos dedicamos al hogar. Y entonces uno de mis desafíos ha sido que pues yo como mujer he buscado otras alternativas para seguir estudiando y trabajar en mi comunidad. También me han enseñado que en mi familia, a pesar de trabajo de campo, que a veces el recurso económico ha sido muy limitado, a veces no cubren los gastos, pero ha tocado llorar, pero también en medio de todo esto ha tocado sonreír y seguir trabajando para mi familia y para mi comunidad. Y es así como motivo a los jóvenes de todo el mundo que hay una transformación y que hay un desarrollo con el interés de seguir caminando y trabajar por nuestra comunidad. Y pues también quiero comentarles, next por favor, el siguiente. Quiero comentarles que vivo en el Valle de Palajunó, Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. Es una comunidad lindísima, que su cobertura es de 10 comunidades del pueblo maya quiché. Este municipio podemos encontrar una diversidad de cultura, de gastronomía, de montañismo y de mucho conocimiento del pueblo maya. Aquí es como nosotros en Guatemala les quiero presentar esta gran comunidad. Next. Valle Palajunoj en Guatemala es una de las comunidades más lindísimas que se dedica a las hortalizas y también a la protección de su cultura. Los habitantes viven del trabajo de campo. Su economía no es estable, pero por ello las comunidades buscan apoyo para su desarrollo y sostenibilidad de sus proyectos. Y de parte del gobierno, pues no se ve la protección de la sociedad y de los bosques. Es por ello que las comunidades trabajan para proteger y poder tener una estabilidad de vida cada año mejor. Next. Es así como nace la organización de jóvenes, hombres y mujeres titulado como Explorando el Valle. Nosotros iniciamos como jóvenes a trabajar en nuestra comunidad hace 3 años y 5 meses. Buscamos el desarrollo ambiental, económico, cultural y también lo económico de nuestras comunidades. A través del turismo comunitario y lograr contrarrestar la pobreza y extrema pobreza y hacer también que los jóvenes vean nuevas alternativas y no tengan que emigrar de nuestro país. Jóvenes que estamos comprometidos con nuestra comunidad y vemos la coordinación con otras organizaciones que tienen el objetivo mismo del desarrollo sostenible de nuestras comunidades del pueblo maya quiché. Next. Pueden ver esta fotografía y me llama mucho la atención de cómo mi equipo como organización de jóvenes pues hemos logrado también apoyar a las familias con sus ingresos, ya que muchas de las mujeres también se dedican al hogar, pero también nosotros como jóvenes les hemos inculcado también para poder tomar nuevas alternativas de vida y poder tener un ingreso económico en su hogar, pero nunca olvidarse de su cultura y de su conocimiento ancestral y proteger sus bosques. Next. El proyecto Corazón de la Montaña pues vino a fortalecer todo ese trabajo que hemos venido trabajando como jóvenes, hombres y mujeres. Uno de este proyecto Corazón de la Montaña tenemos 3 resultados. 3 resultados que impactó a las comunidades y fortaleció el turismo comunitario, y así es como venimos trabajando para tener el ingreso de las familias. Uno de los primeros resultados está enfocado en la recuperación de especies nativas forestales y proteger nuestros bosques. El segundo resultado está enfocado a la implementación de un vivero forestal, también de plantas medicinales y arbustos, conociendo el uso de las plantas medicinales desde el conocimiento de las comadronas que viven en nuestras comunidades del Valle de Palajunó, Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. El resultado número 3 está enfocado en la participación de las mujeres en producir las plantas medicinales y procesarlas a través de tés, jabones, champú y también los vegetales, procesarlos como mermeladas, una alternativa para poder ellas tener ingreso en su hogar. El proyecto Corazón de la Montaña ha venido contribuyendo a los ingresos de las mujeres que son luchadoras en nuestras comunidades. También ha venido a contribuir los ingresos de los jóvenes que están estudiando para lograr sus sueños. También este proyecto ha venido a buscar el desarrollo de la población de nuestras comunidades. También hemos visto a través de los productos, pues ha venido a contribuir con la alimentación de nuestra población. Next. Siguiente, por favor. Para nosotras las comadronas acá en nuestras comunidades, pues han sido unas mujeres con gran conocimiento que nos enseñan como jóvenes a no dejar atrás las plantas medicinales, ya que las plantas medicinales son fundamentales para nuestra salud. También son el medio principal para las enfermedades graves y severas en nuestras comunidades. Mujeres que también trabajan para que nuestros conocimientos ancestrales no se van perdiendo, sino que se van replicando a través de jóvenes y niños que buscamos el desarrollo de nuestras comunidades. También a través del COVID, pues nos ha traído y nos ha afectado. Hubo una pérdida en el campo a través de todas las restricciones que hubo en nuestro país. Pero así como jóvenes hemos venido trabajando y luchando para poder no dejar atrás el desarrollo sostenible de nuestra comunidad. También a través del proyecto Corazón de la Montaña nos ha tenido unidos para buscar un cambio y un desarrollo y una transformación de nuestras comunidades. Sabemos que no podemos dejar de trabajar en nuestras comunidades, porque hay mucho que hacer y poder brindar también, no solo a la sociedad, también al ambiente que nos necesita y también nos protege. El COVID-19 nos ha enseñado a tomar nuevas modalidades de cambio que nos ha traído la pandemia, pero nos ha enseñado a seguir trabajando y luchando para tener un mundo mejor. Next. Es así como veo a mi comunidad todos los días buscar el desarrollo. Next. Como organización, queremos seguir trabajando el desarrollo comunitario. Soñamos entre unos 5 años tener un equipamiento totalmente de toda la formación de las mujeres y seguir trabajando con ellas para empoderarlas. También trabajamos con toda la población para tener la equidad de género dentro de nuestras comunidades. Soñamos contar con un restaurante y hoteles comunitarios donde van a ser utilizados y van a promocionar nuestros productos y tener senderos protegidos y caminar dentro de ellos y tener ese ambiente puro dentro de nuestras comunidades y disfrutar de esas riquezas naturales que tenemos. Uno de nuestros principales atractivos turísticos acá en nuestras comunidades es el volcán Santa María y Mirador Santiaguito, que son caminatas súper extraordinarias que podemos encontrar una diversidad de flora y fauna. Queremos también tener a nuestros visitantes cómodamente y podamos tener en temporadas altas a 1000 personas y temporadas bajas 400 personas para contribuir al turismo comunitario y al desarrollo económico. Y también darles a conocer toda esta importancia de tener a los bosques en protección y también que conozcan el conocimiento ancestral y de todos los servicios turísticos que tenemos acá en Guatemala. Es así como nosotros soñamos tener un cambio desde nuestras comunidades y poder disfrutar de toda esa diversidad. Siguiente, por favor. Les presento a un equipo de trabajo que me ha apoyado en todo este caminar. Estos jóvenes han impulsado varios proyectos en nuestras comunidades que también no dejamos atrás a los niños que son principalmente importantes en nuestra sociedad. Desde niño vamos inculcando la importancia de tener a nuestros bosques y disfrutar de aromas de nuestras plantas medicinales. Trabajamos para el desarrollo, el cambio y la transformación de nuestras comunidades. Next. Es así como hoy presenté y estamos contribuyendo al cambio climático, también estamos contribuyendo para que nuestra cultura no se pierda en nuestra comunidad. Así, muchas gracias, como lo decimos acá en nuestro pueblo maya quiché, Maltiosh, que Dios les bendiga y muchas gracias por esta gran oportunidad. Ser joven en medio de este panel, me siento muy, muy contenta. Muchas gracias. Un abrazo desde Guatemala.
Muchísimas gracias, Fabiola. Su proyecto El Corazón de la Montaña es una inspiración para todos y todas. Y ojalá los turistas van a regresar a la valle en los años a venir. Bueno, I'll continue in English. So Francis is with us again. So Francis, if you could unmute yourself, and we will go back to the presentation from Ghana on mercury and mining. So Francis, the floor is yours. If we could have the presentation as well.
Good morning. This is Francis Otibuatin, presenting community mining for local people in Ghana. And community mining in Ghana is something that is very interesting, and you all have to know how it works. I'm beginning with the interventions, how it started, and what the government is doing to prevent illegal mining in Ghana. And it's about, I'm starting from the genesis, the interventions, and the way forward of illegal mining in Ghana. And the presentation will start from the introduction, the genesis of illegal mining in Ghana, drivers of illegal mining in Ghana, then consequences of illegal mining in Ghana. I will begin with the introduction of illegal mining in Ghana. Illegal mining started about in the 14th century, long time ago in Ghana. In fact, our forefathers used to trade in gold with the Europeans. And you can know that they were using rudimentary implements in the form of panning and dig and wash. So this was less harmful to our environment in Ghana. And you can see the pictures where people were using panning and washing of the gold materials. But in recent times, you can see that the people are using sophisticated machines like the bulldozers and a whole lot of graders to destroy the land. And you can see that it's now very, very harmful in Ghana. And this involves sophisticated equipment such as excavated pumping machines, dozers, payloaders, dredgers, among others. In fact, the drivers of this illegal mining in Ghana comes from people complain about unemployment. Others also say that barriers to get proper documents that's required for exploration and concession requirements. In fact, there's also another penchant for money. People want to make money in the shortest possible time. The consequences of illegal in Ghana, you can see the lot of pollution of water bodies. Harmful chemicals such as mercury is used in the processing causing damage to water bodies. And you can see the waters. You can see that before the water was very blue, and you can see that now the waters are very reddish. In fact, it's now something that you cannot compare to how it used to be. In fact, you can also talk about child labor. Children are mostly used in the illegal mining site for cheap labor. Proliferation of weapons, also for the miners to protect themselves. Illegal mining sites also use weapons to protect themselves. There's also violence due to ownership of the illegal mining site, particularly when encroachers or small scale or large scale concessions are in contention. And this is some of the interventions that the government is doing to curb the illegal mining in Ghana. There are many ways, but the most popular one is the ICMIC, which the government is trying to create community mining so that this community mining will be regularized in such a way that we can reduce the use of harmful chemicals in the processing of mining. And the IMCIM is a multi-sectoral approach of the fight against illegal mining in Ghana and led to the formation of the operations which were used to prevent the illegal miners from destroying. In fact, records show that if nothing is done about illegal mining in Ghana, in 10 to 15 years' time, we'll be importing water to Ghana because all the water bodies have been destroyed. And the use of chemicals also in these indigenous communities is also causing a lot of harm to health of the people in the localities. The President Vanguard also deployed men to the regions and also to prevent these people from doing all this illegal mining. In fact, GEF Small Grant Program is also doing a lot to support the program. In fact, what they are doing now is reducing the use of mercury in the emission to improve the process of mining, or process of getting the gold in Ghana. They're also supporting alternative livelihood enterprise in the development of the mining sector. In fact, we are also doing a lot to provide alternative employment, like training the miners so that some can go into different kind of livelihood in order not to be idle. You have an idea that the devil has job for the idle hands. So when they are trained in alternative livelihood, it means they can do better instead of going back to the mining. Then we're also promoting community mining concept, so that this community mining concept will train the miners in a way that they will know they will not use harmful chemicals in the mining sector. And we're also promoting alternative mercury-free technologies. In fact, there are a lot of technology which we are doing to promote mercury-free processing of gold in Ghana. And this one is very important and is doing a lot, doing very well, because we all know how harmful the mercury is doing and what mercury is doing to destroy most of our water bodies. And in fact, what we are doing now is to reduce about 98% of mercury from our mining sectors. And that is what we are using community mining to train and also get most of the science people involved in all the sectors of mining so that they can also monitor the day-to-day activities of the miners. Sustainable community mining is also very important so that we can reduce at least 0 mercury in our mining sectors. We are doing a lot nowadays so that the mining sector will, even though we cannot stop, the gold that is in our land is there for us to explore. But that doesn't mean that we should also use harmful chemicals to destroy the land. The indigenous, if we destroy all the mining sectors or the vegetations on the land, it means that the indigenous people on that same community will not get water to drink, they will not get potable drinking water, they will also not get arable land to farm on it. So what the government is doing now is that we are reclaiming most of the land. If we're able to reclaim the land that has already been destroyed and also revegetate the land, it means that it can go back to how it used to be. And in this way, the indigenous people can also go back to use the lands for their farm. We are also remediating the polluted lands. We're also training the miners so that they can use 0 mercury gold processing technologies. Also sustainable community mining and 0 mercury in mining. Also alternative livelihoods, as I said already. All these things are what the government is doing to support the mining sector, because we cannot do away with the mining sector, but all we can do now is to train the miners so that they will use a proper and organized method of mining to reduce the use of harmful products. In fact, the president in safeguarding the environment and for the efforts of eliminating illegal mining have launched community mining as the best solution to galamsey in galamsey mining. In Ghana, those who mine or who do galamsey in Ghana, the galamsey is the illegal mining in Ghana, and those who engage in galamsey are called galamseyers. And also, the small-scale miners have also been trained in the mineral section, and we have also mapped all the lands so that we can know how we will train all these small-scale miners to use proper methods of mining. In conclusion, illegal mining has its social vices, but the community mining has come out to regulate and curb all the social vices, and it will eliminate the use of mercury from the mining sector. As such, I urge the convention to support the community mining and incorporate it into their program so that in future, we all do our best to eliminate the use of mercury in Ghana and all over the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you so much, Francis. And it seems we had a little bit of unwanted incursions into our webinar as well. But just to say that your program is part of an SGP innovation program on artisanal and small-scale gold mining. So Ghana is one of a number of countries that are developing alternative approaches to mercury, and I believe you shared some of these experiences at the Minamata COP a few years ago. And we hope that in the future we can have more cooperation between countries in Africa and beyond through the innovation program. In the words of the first Jeff CEO, to take the points of light and to turn them into a spotlight for the global environment. So thank you so much, Francis. Time is running short and we have a very important guest speaker who has been listening to all of the interventions. It is the CEO of the GEF, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. So I have been monitoring the Q&A and we will try to come back to some of your questions, but we will now transition straight into the reactions from Carlos Manuel, who bears no introduction. He's the current GEF CEO and former Minister of the Environment for 3 times in Costa Rica. So Carlos Manuel, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration will formally launch very soon in June. we've heard from many of the panelists about how Indigenous peoples' territories are important and often recognized for both the carbon storage, but also the watershed protection, both vital ecosystem services at both national and international levels. So from your perspective, what do you see, what's the role for Indigenous peoples in this restoration challenge under some of the international agreements, and what are any reactions that you have from what you've heard today? The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Terence. Muchísimas gracias, Terence. Y un gusto de estar con todos ustedes y particularmente con aquellos que son de América Central, América Latina y hablan en español. Fabiola, la presentación tuya estuvo muy, muy bonita. So thank you so much, Terence, Joko, and everybody for inviting me. I see a lot of friends here in the screen, and I was really delighted and glued to my screen as I was hearing Lucy and Francis and Joanne, Fabiola and Barça. By the way, I was very impressed by what Francis presented to us. You know, very, and particularly the slide of the river, the before and after the slide of the river. I mean, that is very worrisome, very serious, and this is happening everywhere. So I'm very happy to be here and hearing you all on the many different things that you've been doing. This is great, but we need to be able to think on how do we scale up what we do, how do we integrate better what we do, not just with what the GF does within other programs, but how do we integrate this more with the overall effort of civil society, and particularly small farmers and indigenous communities. But even more importantly, how do we connect what we do with the overall 2030 agenda and the possible ambitious political commitments that will be coming out of COP15 and COP26. And the many other relevant and important elements, like the ones that Terence was mentioning to us in terms of the big, huge global challenge with regards to restoration of ecosystems. We need to restore in between 4 to 5 billion hectares of the planet. We need to do it in a way that is cost efficient, and in a way that generate opportunities to those who live in the landscape. So the work that the SGP does with this landscape, seascape approach is fabulous. This is great, but we need to really understand how do we begin connecting the dots with the main and major political objectives that are aiming for very strong, ambitious targets in 2030. I would say, Terence, that we will never achieve if we have a 30% commitment out of COP15. We will never achieve the 30% if we are not really achieving the 1.5%. And we, on the other way around, we will never achieve the 1.4% if we don't consolidate the 30%. And both the 30% and the 1.5% will never be done if we don't have local communities and indigenous communities in the center of that effort. So in a very simplistic manner, Terence, without the effort that we are doing here with indigenous communities, the small farmers, will never achieve the 30%. We will never achieve the 1.5%. And that is very clear to me. So being able this year to keep track on those global political negotiations, to really understand how do we, what is the role that we should be playing in that context, and understanding as well the replenishment process of the GF is extremely important. We have proven that the small grant program is successful. It is inclusive. It addresses many issues that are relevant for the 2030 agenda. but we have been unable to move the needle in terms of the big aspirations that we have. We need to really understand, as we now work on a landscape, seascape approach, how do we go from the very interesting small projects that are helping us, and we can call them the pilots. How do we go from the pilots to the policy development? And that is key, because we've been doing for 30 years, 25 years, great projects, but we haven't solved the issue of land tenures. We haven't solved the issue of rights. So we need to be more savvy, more smart, more focused on how every single investment that we do through the SGP with indigenous communities, small farmers, are helping us creating those policy, legal frameworks that at the end of the day will give us the possibility to have a higher impact. Otherwise, we will continue to doing very good things, but unfortunately, at a scale which is small. And my conversation with Jocko, with the SGP steering committee, are very clear that this is a great opportunity that we will be having these next years in terms of how do we access to bigger funding so we can channel those resources through the SGP, which has been a fabulous project. I have lived all my life in Costa Rica. I grew up professionally speaking, being very close to the JEF and to the SGP. And, I'm one of the biggest fans that SGP has in the planet, because I've seen the things that SGP has done on the ground. And that is very important. So having a long-term, we need to have this long-term vision, which is something that the internal evaluations, UNDP, GF has told us, we need to, now's the time to really have this long-term vision, which is, what I've been saying about understanding the role and the opportunities that we have in terms of the 2030 agenda and the many multilateral agreements that may come this year. But also, this is the time for, bring together long-term visions, talking about the governance structures and modalities of the SGP as we see ourselves, the GF in the GF 8 programming proposal, promoting things which are really, really important. I want to mention 4 of them. One is we need to provide universal access, not just to all countries, but also how do we get more directly to the CSOs? In some countries, we need to go through the Minister of Environment or the political focal point to do the proper distribution of an allocation of resources for CSO. And I tend to believe that there are some issues that we should be dealing so we can have a more direct access to CSOs. The other element, we need to maximize fundings
para que las donaciones y los recursos puedan llegar en mayor volumen y a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil. Este es un elemento clave porque este es un elemento que los donantes constantemente están buscando, ¿no?
That's an element which is important. The third element that we've been discussing has to do with promoting more innovation, scaling up and replication. And I was very, very glad to hear a lot, Terence, about, how we're moving bigger and faster on South-South exchanges, on how knowledge management and learn lessons is becoming something more consistent, more strong. And bringing people from Ghana to Costa Rica to talk about how they're dealing with mercury in artisanal gold mining is fundamental, because they're dealing with the same problems over there in Ghana that we're doing here in Costa Rica and Honduras and Guatemala as well, in Ecuador and Peru, and that element is a very important element. Then one third element, or no, fourth element, which is not less important in what we are looking forward to scale up in Jeff 8 with respect to SGP is the issue of supporting the most vulnerable. And this is critical because it is something that we're trying to kind of bring throughout everything that we do in the GF, climate change and degradation of resources are making those socially vulnerable even more vulnerable. And we need to really invest and allocate resources in those who are more vulnerable. And at the same time, I see, and I would like to finish this intervention, Terence, by saying that politically speaking, I follow a lot the finance climate negotiations, and I see a great opportunity to really access resources that were not there before in relation to dealing investment with the most vulnerable, investing in resilience and investing in climate adaptation in developing nations. So if we can be perceived and if we can be able to present ourselves as a very efficient on-the-ground program that can canalize efficiently global resources for adaptation and resilience, we may be in a very positive situation to think that we may be able to have more resources to really begin the upscaling. So thank you so much, Terence, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. There are many comments in the chat saying you're giving people courage to go back to their daily work and keep going. So yesterday we had a steering committee, and one of the questions we had an evaluation of SGP was what next? The landscape approach of clustering of SGP grants has been seen as a successful way of having higher impact, and you've brought to our attention all of these international processes. Now in Costa Rica, there is a scheme to finance restoration through payments for ecosystem services, watersheds. We have some experiences elsewhere in SGP of water payments. Any ideas about how that coupling of national finance to international finance for landscape restoration, just maybe in a couple of words, how that could work?
Yeah. That's a very good question. We normally see restoration as a big cost, a necessary cost. We need to restore because otherwise as people cannot, produce their food, cannot maintain their livelihoods, will be less resilient to climate change. We see it as a cost. But there are many experiences in many countries, particularly at the subnational level, where we see that the costs are way below the benefits on the long term, but also on the very short term. And Costa Rica, my country, indeed it is a country that we constantly, on a weekly basis, see the benefit of being able to restore the landscapes. We doubled the size of our forests in the last 25 years in areas that were dedicated to cattle ranching and subsistence agriculture, and activities, productive activities were really low because of the degradation of soils and the landscapes. And as we developed these financial mechanisms, the payment for environmental services, we basically put a tax on fossil fuels. We basically did adjustment on the water fees. We created a big fund, and that fund began investing in restoration, which, by the way, 40% of the beneficiaries are very poor people, indigenous communities and farmers who cannot have a decent livelihood because the soils and the ecosystem and the landscapes are highly degraded. Today, 20 years later, when the big hurricane hits Central America, Costa Rica is the one that has the less economic and human impacts, because these restored areas give us that adaptation or resilient capacity. Last November, we got two huge hurricanes that hit mainly Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala, but heavy rains hit Costa Rica and Panama. And definitely the impact of those extreme weather events in Costa Rica are way lower than what the rest of Central America has. And that is because mainly we've been able to restore ecosystems to a mechanism that generates an income. We pay people to restore, we pay people to protect the forest, and that money is not coming from the government. That money is coming from those who are being benefited by restoring the landscape and protecting the forest. So I always wonder, Terence, why we got 63 countries with some kind of understanding or experience in PES on water, mainly on water, little on carbon, very little on biodiversity, but nevertheless, we got 63 countries that have some kind of experiences, and none of them has gone to the national level in terms of a jurisdictional approach, or we haven't done the jurisdictional approach, and there are no laws, no legal frameworks, and we haven't created proper institutions. We have created a lot of projects, but what happens when the project ends? That project is not helping the country develop policies, the institutions, and the financial instruments, so we can finish the project and there is a policy legacy, so to speak. So this is a key element, because at the end of the day, Terence, the work of protecting ecosystems, restoring landscapes, is a work that should be led by national governments, and we all need to help and understand what is our role with national governments. And in this case, I do have a high interest from the GF to help governments through SGP and many other mechanisms to develop the right policies and the right institutions. Otherwise, we'll never achieve the aspiration in terms of scales, and instead, and in terms of spreading the benefits of the restoration and the conservation, because we all know that there are human and economic or socioeconomic benefits in the effort of protecting and restoring nature. It's not just as we look or as we thought in the past that it's just a cost. We need to put money, we need to put money. Now that we've been investing in conservation and restoration, we see the direct benefits of doing that. And in the context of the 1.5, and in the context of the 30%, in the context of achieving the Minamata goals and the chemicals conventions goals, we see a lot of direct benefits. So we need to really help governments and do that. On the other side, I want to really work with governments to help us deal with the land tenure and rights issue, which is a big barrier for indigenous communities and local farmers. We still have the same situation that we have 20 years ago, and we are just beginning to realize the dimension, at least myself, because I saw this as an issue of rights, tenure. This is an issue that has to do with discrimination and racism as well. This is more complex than what we thought, or at least as I thought before, and the holistic approach that we need to do in order to deal and overcome these barriers, so we can scale up what we've been doing very good at the pilot or a small scale is one of the biggest challenges that we have in front of us in the next years.
Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel. The question of the rights-based approach in the 2030 by 30 target is something which is actively being discussed right now. We very much hope, and many of the partners of SGP, that focus on land rights and rights-based approaches will be incorporated.
The right-based approach is great, and we have learned a lot. We all do things under that premise, under that fundament and principle, but governments don't. Governments keep of not doing their national planning, their budgeting allocation, their sectoral planning based on this principle that we all share. So here's a very good example of the very concrete challenges that we need to do. GEF, UNDP, and the many conservation development agencies, we got the right base approach. Unfortunately, governments are not there yet, and we need to understand how we can play a role. So this is in the DNA of the decision-making process within our governments and public policy development.
Well, with those words, I think it's a very fitting moment to draw this to a close. We are running out of time. We have one or two other people on the panel that, if in the members of the audience that might want to say some words, I would like to invite Hao Liang Xu from UNDP, if you would like to say anything about the SDGs integration. I'm not sure if he's, if I would just...
No, thank you very much, Terence. Carlos, Manuel, very nice to see you online, and the dear panelists, you know, and I listened really with great interest to your presentations, and really fascinating. Just confirmed what I have always known, that small grants programs really work. And I see a lot of colleagues online, and I see certainly Yoko, but also I see Delphine also online. And so for the 25,000 projects that small grants program have supported over the last 8 years, and 30% of them in 94 countries are directly supporting indigenous people's participation in local development. So I think it's really a significant force for change. And in terms of SDGs, as you know, this year is the year of COP15 for Biodiversity Convention and COP26 for climate change. And in relation to these events, the Secretary General of the United Nations has made a number of important speeches recently, essentially focusing on the people, the war of the world on nature, right? Because we're literally at war against the nature, against our interest, and that doesn't make sense. So he called for a major shift in this, and really urging the world community, the leaders and everyone, right, to find the harmony between planet and peace, and for a sustainable future. And I think the indigenous people are at the forefront of this war, to stop this war against the nature. So I think what you are doing is really significant. And Carlos Manuel knows, and everyone else I think also know very well that the GEF Small Grants Program is an important part of the effort, in the overall, GEF, programming, from larger scale programs to enabling activities and so forth. Right? And the national policies cannot have a real meaning unless it is tested and implemented at, local level. So I think in this regard, I just want to say that UNDP is extremely, committed, and feels fortunate that we can be an enabler, to your effort at the local level. And what I take from this discussion earlier is, we really needed to look at, the way to scale up the successes, because you have so many successes. If you look at the innovation library of the GEF Small Grants Program website, there's more than 1,000 knowledge products. So we needed to really scale this knowledge and success and achieve big impact. The second one, I think, is to really support more South-South exchange, knowledge exchange. I think the pandemic has taught us that we can do this fairly quickly and efficiently, right? So we have new means of internet connection that can allow us to do this more effectively. So I know that we have passed a lot of the time, so I won't say a lot more, but I just want to really reaffirm our commitment to support your effort, and we are in this together. Thank you very much. Over to you, Terence.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hao Liang, for those very important words. To note that this is really the beginning of a conversation which will continue for the next 12 months. The GEF8 replenishment meetings have just been initiated, have started, and the SGP will be going through a consultation process on precisely these questions of how to interpret the long-term vision and the maturity and the evolving bringing to scale of the program, including very much within UNDP's context as well. So I would like to now draw this to a close. If Carlos Manuel, you have any final words, I'll pass you the floor. But I'd like to thank everyone who's participated today, and we will share the recording, and we will share also some of the timelines for the consultation process for the next GEF8 replenishment for the SGP. So Carlos Manuel.
Thank you, Terence, and Howlin, thank you so much, Joko, Delphine, and many others. Thanks for today's event. I would like to close with a positive note. Even though this last 15 months has been terrible, very difficult to all of us, there are many positive things that we've been drawing out of this pandemic and the socioeconomic crisis that we've been through. And I'm very optimistic that today, more than ever, we've been able to narrow the gap within the scientific information, data, and the attention that we should give to scientists with the political ambitions and commitments from our leaders. Never before I've seen, such a close understanding within the overall political community with the scientific community. And this is great. And we need to really understand that we must capitalize on this. So there's going to be political commitment. The political commitment needs to be translated into concrete targets, objectives and targets. And this is happening. We already have, climate-related targets, and we have a lot of other targets. Here's where the action is needed. Define the actions, define the actors, and define, very importantly, how do we mobilize financial resources from all sources? And I want to underline all sources. If we are able to really understand how do we mobilize resources from all sources, we may be very close to have an overall understanding on how do we design those actions that will respond directly to the political goals and targets that are coming from our leaders, head of states in the many different global environmental conventions. So I'm very optimistic that we're beginning this decade, even though we are beginning it with a pandemic, at the same time with an understanding that we have a broken relationship with humans, we have a broken relationship with nature, and the way to solve it is based on this understanding that our consumption and production pattern should change, and that means a strong bottom-up approach on implementing many different things that the SGP has been doing for almost 30 years. So I'm very optimistic. It's going to be very hard, and the support that we may receive from all of you in terms of good ideas, good counsel, but also political and social support of the GF8 replenishment process is crucial in this context. So thank you so much, Joko and Terence, for the opportunity of joining you all today.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel, and to everyone. We will remember your words: mobilize resources from all sources, financial, non-financial, political, civil society movements, all of them. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I know some people are up at 3 a.m. in the Pacific and are saying this has kept them awake. So thank you to everyone. And we will look forward to being in touch with all of you on the next steps with the future of the SGP. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Gracias.
Carlos Manuel and Hao-Liang particularly. And thank you very much for your kind words.
Good morning.
Gracias. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
To the presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Delphine, it was good to see you.
Delphine.
Good to see you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
L'autre, c'est lui-même qui a monté le projet. C'est qui? Le coordinateur de notre télescope. Ah, je le connais pas. Oui. Lui-même, il a en conférence. Oui, depuis 14 ans.
Bye.